Welcome to today's Explainer. So, have you ever wondered why some massive companies manage to stay incredibly relevant decade after decade, while others just completely fade into obscurity? Well, today we're going to break down the actual mechanics behind that. We're looking at the concept of strategy and diving deep into the strategic management process to see exactly how successful organizations formulate, implement, and ultimately sustain their competitive advantage in the real world. All right, let's jump right in.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be moving through 5 key areas: decoding strategic management, defining vision, mission, and objectives, diving into scanning and formulation, walking through the implementation phase, and finally wrapping up with evaluation and control. Let's kick things off with a slightly provocative question just to anchor our analysis in reality. Think about a giant e-commerce company. Take Flipkart in India, for example. How do behemoths like Flipkart navigate relentless competition, wild shifts in consumer habits, and massive technological disruptions without totally collapsing? Well, spoiler alert, the secret isn't a magical crystal ball, it is a rigorous, highly structured process.
Which brings us to our first section, decoding strategic management.
To really get this, we kind of need to completely shift our mindset away from thinking of a strategy as this static, dusty document sitting on some executive's desk. Strategic management is actually a dynamic, continuous cycle of interconnected steps. You move from the organization's vision and mission right into environmental scanning, then strategy formulation, and finally evaluation and control. And here's the kicker. Any shift in the external environment might force a company to alter its mission and respond all over again. It's an ongoing, living system that absolutely runs on continuous feedback.
But listen, every continuous cycle needs a North Star. That brings us to Section 2. Vision, mission, and objectives.
Let's break these down, because they matter. A vision statement answers what a company ultimately wants to become. It is your long-term aspiration. Going back to our real-world example, Flipkart's vision was to transform commerce in India through technology. Notice how that sounds? It's ambitious, it's inspirational, and it is focused entirely on the future.
Now, in contrast, a mission focuses entirely on the present purpose. It's the reason the organization exists right now, today. It clarifies the actual scope of operations. Flipkart's mission was providing affordable and reliable online shopping to every Indian household. See the difference? It tells you exactly what they're doing today, who they're serving, and what makes them unique in the market.
When you lay them out side by side, the contrast is pretty stark. A vision is future-oriented, usually looking 5 to 10 years out, and it's purposefully a bit abstract. A mission, though, focuses on the medium to long term, grounding you in present, day-to-day operations. It is highly practical and actionable. Basically, the vision inspires while the mission guides. But let's be real. Inspiration and guidance just aren't enough on their own to run a business. We need concrete benchmarks. That is exactly where objectives come into play. These translate that lofty vision and mission into a measurable reality. Saying you want to be profitable is just a vague goal. Setting an objective means saying, we are going to increase profitability by 10% over the previous year. It has a hard deadline, and it is a quantifiable target.
Okay, with our North Star clearly set, we move right into Section 3, scanning and formulation.
Here's the truth. You literally cannot formulate a strategy without knowing exactly where you stand. Managers rely heavily on tools like SWOT analysis for this. First, you assess your internal capabilities. For instance, Flipkart recognized its remarkably strong tech platform as a massive internal strength. Then, you evaluate the external environment, weighing huge opportunities, like a boom in smartphone users, against very serious threats, like Amazon aggressively entering their market. Alongside SWOT, pest analysis is another absolute must-have tool for scanning the external landscape. Organizations have to systematically anticipate political regulatory changes, economic fluctuations like sudden inflation, social lifestyle shifts, and emerging technological advancements. Missing even one of these early signals, that can completely derail an organization's long-term sustainability. You have to see around the corners.
So once all those insights from your environmental scanning are gathered up, the actual formulation happens across a cohesive hierarchy of 3 interconnected levels. At the very top, you have corporate-level strategy deciding the broad directions, like what lines of business should we even be in. In the middle, competitive or business-level strategy focuses on how to actually win against rivals in a specific market. And finally, functional level strategy translates those big ideas into short-term, action-oriented departmental plans. Think about where you sit in your own organization for a second. Are you deciding broad corporate directions, plotting a competitive business strategy, or executing functional level marketing plans? For the whole thing to work, all three levels must align perfectly.
Now let's transition from the thinking phase into the doing phase with Section 4, the implementation phase.
Implementation is notoriously where brilliant strategies go to die. It is grueling work. You have to actively communicate the plan all the way down the chain, build out the actual organizational structure to support it, design brand new policies, fight tooth and nail for budget and resources, and only then can you actually execute the functions. Trust me, even the most flawlessly formulated strategy fails completely without this diligent step-by-step execution.
The sheer complexity of this execution is beautifully captured by the McKinsey 7S framework. It highlights that successful implementation isn't just about tweaking the hard elements like your strategy, structure, and systems. No, you absolutely must align those with the soft, cultural elements of the organization, the management style, your staff, their skills, and the shared superordinate goals. If you change a major system but completely ignore the company culture, your implementation is going to stall out, guaranteed.
Let's ground this again in our Flipkart example. How did they operationalize their really aggressive expansion strategy? Well, they didn't just write it down on a whiteboard and hope for the best. They introduced cash on delivery specifically to overcome a cultural lack of consumer trust in online payments. They heavily allocated resources to build their own massive logistics arm, eCart, just to ensure reliable delivery in a tough infrastructure. They took their strategy and forced it into tangible, boots-on-the-ground action.
Which brings us to our final regulatory phase that closes the loop, Section 5. Evaluation and control.
At this stage, you have to constantly be checking your pulse. Are your actions actually hitting the targets you set? Managers rely on strategic control techniques like gap analysis to spot the exact difference between expectation and reality. Or benchmarking to see how you stack up against the best in the industry. And if you find a gap, you don't wait, you fix it immediately.
In practice, this means relentless, continuous monitoring. Flipkart meticulously tracked delivery times, return rates, and customer satisfaction metrics. When they saw competitors stepping up and offering aggressive discounts, they adapted. They took corrective action by launching loyalty programs, like Flipkart Plus, purely to ensure they sustained their competitive edge over the long haul.
However, it is incredibly crucial to note that this evaluation phase faces massive hurdles. Employees might push back against behavioral controls, and managers might obsess way too much over short-term quarterly results. But perhaps the biggest trap of all is confusing efficiency, which is just doing things right, with effectiveness, which is doing the right things. You can be incredibly efficient at a task that is entirely the wrong strategic move for the company. Misunderstanding that distinction can fatally undermine everything you've built.
In conclusion, strategic management is not a one-time exercise, but a continuous cycle of analysis, decision-making, action, and learning. I love this quote because it perfectly encapsulates our entire explainer today. By continuously integrating formulation, implementation, and evaluation, an organization doesn't just blindly react to change, it learns, it adapts, and it thrives in spite of it.
So, I want to leave you with this final, crucial question to chew on. Look at your own teams, your own workflows, and your own company. Is your organization strategy just a dusty document sitting in a drawer somewhere? Or is it a living, breathing cycle that is constantly adapting to the world around it? Because understanding and mastering this continuous loop, that is the true key to long-term success. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.